Welcome back to the Lumiose Post, where we talk about all things Pokemon, and today we're going to be talking about what Pokemon X2 and Pokemon Y2 looked like. Now, you might immediately go, okay, is this a fan game, or, what's happening here? Because I've played every Pokemon game, and X2, Y2 is not a thing. And you're right, it's not a thing, but it actually was supposed to be a thing. This is something that we've actually known about for a while. If you look at, the coding of Sun and Moon, it's kind of got a list of games, and it's got Pokemon X and Y, it's got Oris, and then it has X2, Y2. We then got further confirmation of this with the Terra leak. A big hack happened at GameFreak, and it kind of got confirmed from that yeah, X2, Y2 was supposed to be a thing. So today we're going to ask ourselves, what was this game about? Because we have a little bit of details on cut content and cut lore, I guess, for the Kalos legendaries and for Kalos as a whole, so we can kind of infer by that what maybe X2 and Y2 was about. And for the record, by doing that, we might be able to figure out some of the pieces that they're putting together for Legends EA. Let's get right into it with what we do know about this game, and then we're going to talk about speculation based on that. So we know that X2, Y2 was going to be a thing. That's the first bit. And we also know that Zygarde was supposed to be a prominent Pokemon in these games. So actually, originally, Zygarde's complete form, we all know it, we all love it, but Zygarde had two of these, actually, and the other one was a design that got reworked into its 10% form. And the details on these were that Zygarde would transform into one of these complete forms based on which legendary he had to kind of fight. So, Yveltal represents death, whereas Xerneas represents life, and Zygarde was supposed to be the balance between that. We can't get too out of control with life, we can't overpopulate the earth, but we also can't get too out of control with death. We can't just kill everything and cause mass extinction level events. Can't do that, so Zygarde is balancing this out. He had a form that was like anti-aircraft to fight Yveltal. In fact, this kind of makes sense because one of Zygarde's signature moves is a move that is able to hit flying types, so that kind of explains that. And then he had a form that was a dog that hunted Xerneas, which was then reworked into the 10% form we have now. And this form, at least as of now, has no lore tied to Xerneas. So, yeah, this is pretty interesting and can tell us a lot about this. We also, another thing we do know about these games is that there was going to be South Kalos. South Kalos is a thing we've theorized a lot about. I did talk about this in a previous video, but basically South Kalos was supposed to be a thing. It was a whole expansion. This kind of makes sense because you have to think this is Gen 6, right after Gen 5, where Black 2 and Y2 had expanded on the Unova region and given us more areas. Basically, X2 and Y2 would have done the same. So, with all this information, what do we think X2 and Y2 was about? Let's get into it. Well, first off, I am assuming that X2 and Y2 were going to be sequels. Black 2 and Y2 were sequels to Black and White. Unfortunately, that's our only piece of evidence we have. There are no other Pokemon games that have 2 in the name like that, so we don't know that X2 and Y2 would have been a sequel, but I really think it makes sense that it would have been, especially, again, just following the pattern of Black 2 and Y2 being that way. And then later, we did get enhanced versions of Sun and Moon, but these were called Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. They didn't call them Sun and Moon 2 because they weren't sequels to Sun and Moon. They were actually just retellings of those stories, more like Platinum or Emerald that we had seen before. So yeah, I'm assuming the naming means that these were going to be sequels, which means that this would take place after X and Y, which means that the events of X and Y have already transpired. So we're not going to get a retelling of Team Flare, and also, more importantly, it means that canonically, the legendary has been caught. So if you're playing Pokemon X2, the character from Pokemon X has already caught Xerneas. He has Xerneas. Xerneas is not a wild Pokemon. Likewise, you're playing Y2, same thing for Yveltal. It's been caught. You can't catch it. Lysander, he's maybe dead. He's definitely not really active. And Team Flare has pretty much fallen. So that's what we can work with. When would this game take place? I'm imagining this game would take place 2 years after Pokemon X and Y. This game would have released in 2015, as that's a gap year. X and Y released in 2013, which means this game would have released 2 years after X and Y. Now, the last time they did this was with Black 2 and White 2 again. We had Black and White, a break year, and then Black 2 and White 2 came out. And so they made the stories of Black 2 and White 2 set 2 years after Black and White. Same thing with Johto. It set the same amount of years that had actually passed since the release of Red and Blue. So I imagine that it would be the same thing here. Now, since this is a sequel, you are not playing as the character from Pokemon X and Y. You're playing as a completely different person. Likewise, I think that they would have this different person start in a different town. There's no need to start in Vanderbilt Town. I imagine this character would start in the new South Kalos region, or rather part of the region. Now, some of South Kalos would definitely be locked into the post-game because we do see that there is a battle island on South Kalos that screams post-game battle facility to me, so I imagine that would not be something you can access immediately, but I do think you would start in South Kalos and work your way through. Very likely there would be new gems. This was another big feature of Black 2 and White 2 that drew a lot of people to these games, was that the gym leaders had changed up a little bit. You know, I can only speculate on what gym leaders would shift around, but an immediate thought is maybe Clement retires to focus more on inventions, and Bonnie, who's a little bit older than now, she's 2 years older, could step up and become a gym leader. And you might say, well, that's still too young to be a Pokemon trainer, but we have Children Elite Four members now and Scarlet and Violet, and we've seen, you know, young characters become gym leaders, so I don't think it would be much of a problem, especially if it's because her brother handed her the keys to the gym, right? Another option could be Ramos or Wolfric. These are older characters, so you can easily write them off as having retired. A big thing about these games is that all of the gym leaders have like some kind of other job or something, so you can easily do kind of like what they did with Bryson and Black 2 and White 2, where they're like, he's an actor now. He doesn't really focus on the gym anymore. He kind of just mainly acts. You can do that with any of these characters. Another one could be perhaps Karina stepping down as gym leader to kind of more so take on the role of her grandfather as this kind of mega evolution guru. I think that also makes a lot of sense. Now, what would the plot of this game be? Well, there's something that just really stands out to me about what we learned about Zygarde, about how this 10% form was originally a complete form that was a dog that hunted Xerneas. And it really got me thinking. The idea of a legendary Pokemon hunting another legendary Pokemon, to me, makes for a really cool Pokemon game. If you also look at the anime, a big thing that happened in the Pokemon XYZ arc of the anime, which very likely would have taken inspiration from this X2 Y2 game, just like how the later part of the Unova anime took a lot of inspiration from the Black 2 and White 2 games. You can see that in this, one thing that happens is Team Flare gets their hands on a Zygarde and basically corrupts it and makes it go rogue. So I'm thinking that that's what would have happened here, is that Team Flare gets access to a Zygarde, rather Neo Team Flare gets access to a Zygarde, and kind of turns it rogue. And perhaps they want to recreate the ultimate weapon, so I could see this going one of two ways. I could see it being a thing of they use this Zygarde's complete form to track down the legendary that the player character didn't catch. So to explain, if you're playing Pokemon X2, remember Xerneas has already been caught by the player character from the first game. So they make a Zygarde they make it the complete form to capture Yveltal. Or, you know, maybe they're even hunting down the original player, and so they have their Zygarde transform into the dog to hunt down the Xerneas in X2. And so you would kind of it'd be like a race to find the hero, and obviously you would protect him. In the end, of course, you would break Team Flare's hold on Zygarde by catching it, I'm sure, and showing it the power of love and friendship, and, you know, everything would be solved. Now, this Neo Team Flare could have been done by Lysander. That's definitely possible. His fate is left pretty open-ended. I mean, he's implied to be dead, but we don't know that he's dead. You know, no body, no death. That's the rule, right? In the manga, he's even stated to have lived, but just has been buried under the rubble. So, yeah, he's basically buried alive. So, you know, we don't know. I could see it going either way, but I more so like the idea of 06 stepping up and becoming the new leader of this Neo Team Flare. I thought that he was a really compelling villain. I think that, you know, he seemed like the kind of guy who, whereas you see other people like Team Galactic, when Cyrus falls, they kind of are like, well, I guess the dream is dead. 06 seems like the kind of guy who, even after Lysander's gone, would be like, yeah, no, I'm still about this. You know, he's a smart guy, very clever scientist. He's also very clearly kind of cunning and stuff. So I could just totally see him going, yeah, the dream's not dead. I'm just going to run this thing now. That seems very 06 to me. So I like the idea of him being the antagonist, but maybe it is Lysander. Now let's talk about just some kind of minor things that I think these games would bring. I do think there would be new Mega Evolutions in this game. One thing that the Terra Leak showed was that there is a placeholder for a Pokemon called Mega Charizard Z. Was this maybe just because look, sometimes Game Freak will trademark things or something that they actually don't intend to work on. Like if you look it up, Pokemon Topaz, I think is what it's called, has been trademarked for years. They've trademarked Pokemon Delta Emerald, even though, you know, there is no Delta Emerald. There's the Delta episode, but not Delta Emerald. They do things like that all the time, so it's not necessarily indicative that there was going to be a Mega Charizard Z. But it looks like to me they at least talked about it, and it just makes sense. Oris gave us new Megas. It makes sense that the game after that would also bring us some more. Very likely, Greninja, Delphox, and Chestnut would have gotten Megas, in my opinion. I mean, this was probably even, in my opinion, reworked into Ash Greninja in the anime. We could also see, because one big thing about Oris was that, at least when you rematch the gym leaders, I can't remember if it was the case when you initially challenged the Elite Four, but the Elite Four, excuse me, not the gym leaders, they would use Mega Evolutions. You know, Phoebe had Mega Sableye, Glacia had Mega Glalie, Drake had Mega Salamence, and Sydney had a Mega... I'm actually completely blanking on what his Mega was, but he had a Mega. Was it Absol? I don't know. But the point is that these Elite Four members were given Megas. I would like to see maybe in this X2Y2 game, they would have done this for the X and Y ones. That would have helped them to stand out a lot more. You know, some obvious ones that come to mind are their aces. So this would make Malva's ace Talonflame, there'd be a Mega Talonflame. Wickstrom, his ace was an Aegislash, so there'd be a Mega Aegislash. Drasna, her ace was a Noivern, so there'd be a Mega Noivern. I need a Mega Noivern. And also, there would be Cybold, his ace was a Barbaracle, so he would use a Mega Barbaracle. All speculation, of course, and you could speculate more on what other Pokemon could get Mega Evolutions. I always thought it was weird Audino was the only Gym 5 Pokemon to get a Mega, so maybe they would have branched out to some other Gym 5 Pokemon. But yeah, some things that I'd like to see from characters. So in X and Y in the post-game, you do this whole plot with Looker, and basically he leaves, but kind of allows Emma to take his old office and kind of start up her own PI business. I would love to see Emma be kind of a side character in this game and be a pretty heavy part of your taking on Neo Team Flare, because you have to think that she was kind of manipulated by Xerosic and Neo Team Flare, or kind of a pseudo Neo Team Flare too, in the events of X and Y. So I think she'd have a bit of a vendetta. It also would be cool to look back at X and Y and see it was a setup for a pretty big character down the road. Also too, maybe in the post game you do some side quests with her and you solve some Lumiose mysteries. What mysteries could be solved in Lumiose? I can't think of any off the top of my head. I guess the Lumiose Ghost Girl. Please, can we get an answer to that, please? But yeah, those are just some ideas for what I think X2 and Y2 could look like based off what we know from the Terra Leak. Be sure to let me know your thoughts. What did you think these games were about? Let me know all that. Also, do you think Legends EA will take any of these potential elements for a Pokemon X2 Y2 game and add them in there? Of course, there's still the debate of, is Legends EA set in the past or the future? I don't know, but I'm definitely kind of leaning future now. But either way, it's fun to speculate. Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. Until next time, I'll see you later.